Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Siim, and today we do another Instagram Q&A. If you want to ask me a question, then make sure you follow me at Siim on Instagram. Alright, first question. Would you recommend taking Berberine before dinner if you train in the morning or noon? So, no. So let's say you lift weights in the morning or noon, then before dinner I wouldn't recommend taking Berberine because the Berberine is still going to inhibit some of the adaptations that you get from exercise because it suppresses mTOR, although it helps with blood sugar regulation and insulin levels. It's not yet the best to take after a resistance training. I would wait at least 12 hours. Or I would wait for the next day before I ever take like a Berberine after resistance training. You can take it before the training, that's going to be fine, but after I wouldn't do that. This episode is brought to you by Bond Charge, formerly known as Blue Blocks. My favorite light and supplementation companies, Blue Blocks, has rebranded themselves as Bond Charge. They're now involved with a huge range of evidence-based products to improve your wellness and life in every way. Their extensive range of premium wellness products helps you to sleep better, perform better, have more energy, recover faster, balance your hormones, and reduce inflammation. My favorites are their red light bulbs because they can be used to create a melatonin-friendly environment in your bedroom by shining only red and not blue or green light waves that will reduce your sleep quality. After starting to use these red light bulbs, I find it much easier to fall asleep and feel less awake before bed. If you want to try out these amazing products that are the cornerstones to my most optimal sleep, then head over to bondcharge.com/SiimLund and use the code SIIM15 to save 15%. What supplements should a 21-year-old take? So that's a very generic question. It's very hard to tell. It depends a lot on your situation, your biomarkers, and goals and things like that. Usually 21-year-olds generally don't need like any actual like metabolic health supplements unless they are obese or metabolically unhealthy. They may, benefit from a few things like creatine if you're exercising. Glycine, I think, is still very beneficial for everyone. They probably don't need collagen yet because they already have higher amounts of collagen because they're young. But I would still consider taking that because it helps with, joints and ligaments and those kind of things and skin. But yeah, it's a very generic supplement. You can check out my supplement list if you are interested. I think it's siimland.co/supplements. And that's going to tell you what supplements I take and what you could also take for different reasons. How does your mornings look like? So my mornings are pretty, I do wake up maybe like 5 or 6. I take a cold shower. I do some red light therapy. I just move my body a little bit, drink some water, and that's pretty much it. Then I start to work. So I think I don't have like any long special morning routine. Just get up and start doing stuff. That's generally what I do. What is your main habits? My main habits mostly have to do with work again, or I like to write, I like to research, I like to exercise, I like to spend time with my wife. Those kind of the things that I enjoy doing the most. What is the difference between waking up at 7 or 5 a.m.? So generally there's no difference in terms of that. They're pretty close to each other. Some like morning people would maybe wake up at 5 or 6, and later people like night owls generally wake up even later, that they wake up like 10 or 11 a.m. But like 5 or 7 a.m. generally is no difference unless it's like maybe the summer versus winter. So at summertime, waking up at 5 is, you're already going to be waking up because the sun is rising. Whereas at winter time, you're probably going to be sleeping because it's dark outside. So the natural sunlight generally has a huge effect on whether or not you wake up or not. Do you use glycine powder? Where can I add it to foods? Yes, I use glycine powder. It's great. I use maybe 10 grams a day, and I add it to coffee. Sometimes I just take it with a spoon, and you can add it to like cottage cheese and something like that. It has like a small sweet taste, which is quite nice, and it doesn't have any like harmful effects. How important is the Randall cycle? So Randall cycle describes, or usually it's referred to in the context of carbohydrates and fats and your body prioritizes different fuel sources at all times. It is burning a mixture of different fuel sources all the time. It's not burning only fat, it's not burning only carbs, it's burning different amounts, and the Randall cycle determines which one is prioritized or which one you burn the most. Usually people use the Randall cycle when they tell you to not eat carbohydrates and fats together. So there is some physiological reason to think that or suggest that, because like fats, especially saturated fats, they can inhibit some or make you somewhat insulin resistant, and keep your blood sugar levels elevated for longer periods of time as well, which is not ideal. And I do think that it is a good idea to avoid high amounts of fats and carbs together, because it also increases the total calorie content of the meal. But yeah, like for the optimal blood sugar and insulin sensitivity, you do want to separate them slightly. This doesn't mean that you can't have any fat with your meal, but it would mean that don't eat like butter with potatoes or butter with bread or deep fried stuff, those kind of things. But let's say some beef that has a little bit of fat with potatoes is fine. And also the total calorie content matters. So the Randall cycle becomes more harmful to your metabolic health the more calories you eat. If you're in a calorie deficit, then the body's own antioxidant defense systems and the other pathways that you turn on with the calorie restriction overcome, or let's say they compensate for that. And likewise with exercise, the exercise is also able to overcome this Randall cycle because of activating AMPK and increasing the GLUT4 receptor activity, which then helps you to clear the bloodstream regardless of the meal content, if that makes sense. So if you do care about it, then make sure you exercise before and don't combine high amounts of carbs and fats together. What I like to do is, before exercise, I eat low carb and restrict carbohydrates, and after exercise, I have the carbohydrates, but I keep the fats somewhat lower. Time-restricted eating for a person with subclinical hypothyroidism and thyroid nodule, is there benefits? Well, there is certain benefits for everyone of doing certain amounts of time-restricted eating. So this means that just don't eat at night and don't eat immediately after waking up. Of course, you shouldn't do like a very long fasting window if you have hypothyroidism or other related issues. So what I would stick to is like a 14 and 10 window, 14 hours fasted and 10 hours fed, which you can achieve by just stopping to eat, or you stop eating at least 3 hours before bed, which is good for sleep quality generally and melatonin production. And likewise, you in the morning, you want to wait maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that before you start eating. And you already achieve the 14 and 10 window very nicely. What is your issue with Eggplant? So I have some Instagram stories about Eggplant, which aren't very positive. Generally, it has to do with the taste. I don't like the taste. It's not very, tasty kind of a vegetable. And when you look at also the micronutrient content, then it's not worth it, in my opinion. It doesn't have any specific or special nutrients that you wouldn't get from other vegetables. And combine it with a bad taste, then in my opinion, it's kind of the shit tier vegetables in that sense. Why not to take glycine with protein-rich foods? What can happen? I do actually recommend to take glycine with protein-rich foods. I've never said anything against that or otherwise. And it's a good idea to take glycine with protein-rich foods, especially foods that have a lot of methionine, because the glycine helps to balance the methionine. Excess methionine can raise your homocysteine, and we know from animal studies that excess methionine also accelerates aging and shortens lifespan. So I think it's makes sense to take some glycine with the protein-rich food, whatever you're eating. But it also makes sense to take glycine with carbs, because glycine helps to suppress blood sugar levels or lower the blood sugar levels. So it's a win-win. You can take glycine with any food. Cold shower for better insulin sensitivity. Cold showers generally don't, or cold showers can help with insulin sensitivity by increasing your brown fat. And brown fat makes you more insulin sensitive. It helps to burn calories. It raises your metabolic rate. So when I take cold showers, then I do notice that it's very easy to lose weight, and it's very, almost effortless to, within reason, of course, to not get extra fat. And I think that cold showers, work through by increasing your brown fat and increasing your metabolic rate by making you shiver. that's the way it improves. So like the brown fat improves your insulin sensitivity, whereas the white fat is just used for just calorie balance. Difference between strength training and hypertrophy training. So generally the main difference is that strength training just requires you to recruit the muscle fibers at a near maximum intensity. So usually you need like 80 to 90% of your 1 rep max to stimulate the muscle fibers to to help with like myofibrillar hypertrophy, which is more like strength based. Hypertrophy is like sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, and that you can achieve with even like 60 to 70% of your 1 rep max, which means that, yeah, for strength, you can stick to somewhere between 3 to 5 reps and, or even like 1 rep is just power, it's like speed, but 3 to 5 reps is usually for strength. And for hypertrophy, like 8 to 12 is generally like this, the hypertrophy ranges. You can also, time under tension affects that as well. And the speed at which you do the movement, if you do exercise very slowly, like you do very slow bench press, for example, but you do only 5 reps, but 1 rep lasts 30 seconds or something, then that also stimulates hypertrophy. But yeah, like generally, if you're just doing like regular 1 second kind of reps, something, or, 1 second eccentric, 1 second concentric, then generally that's strength is built with more like lower amounts of reps and longer rest periods. Whereas hypertrophy is, you do get hypertrophy from strength training as well. Like if you lift any weight, you will improve your aesthetics or body composition in terms of the muscle growth. But directly hypertrophy you build with somewhat like 8 to 12 reps, something like that. What is the best veggie in your opinion? So I like carrots and cauliflower. I think those are very good for the microbiome, as well as they also have like some antioxidants in better amounts than, like, say, eggplant, for example. How to increase bone density in elderly already 2 hips replaced? So bone density, the best thing for that is some weight-bearing exercise. And generally, resistance training with weights, barbells and stuff is the number one way to do that. Gymnastics. So, if you're elderly, then you're probably not going to do gymnastics, but gymnastics or gymnasts have high amounts of bone density as well, because the force when they spring off the board or whatever on the floor, then that does, like, your body just needs to experience this, or the bones need to experience this high intensity stimulation or force. And that triggers this collagen synthesis and bone density increase as well. And weightlifting. But obviously there's also, you need to make sure that you have enough protein, and collagen intake is also very important for that. And based on the studies, then the best way to do that is to, 1 hour before a weight-bearing exercise, you consume 10 to 15 grams of collagen peptides with 50 milligrams of vitamin C, because vitamin C initiates the collagen synthesis and is essential for that. And 1 hour before exercise, you drink that. Then you do some weight bearing exercise, more of a higher intensity, something like 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max. Or you could do plyometrics as well, so jumps, sprints, they're very similar in terms of the intensity, and that's gonna trigger the collagen synthesis and the bone density as well in the joints. Is high LDL 260 plus dangerous if your triglycerides are below 100? So that's obviously a very controversial topic. I'm not gonna say if it is dangerous or not. I would still gravitate more towards wanting to be the LDL to be lower. 260 LDL is super high, and especially your triglycerides are also pretty high, 100. If your triglycerides were to be 30, then maybe, but because the triglycerides are also 100, then I would definitely consider that somewhat dangerous, because what the thing with LDL is that LDL status, or the LDL particle size, matters. Whether or not it's oxidized matters. Lipoprotein A, that matters, yes, but LDL alone is also a risk factor, because eventually your LDL is going to get oxidized anyway. Your you're a living, breathing human or a living, breathing being, and eventually the LDL, if you have higher amounts of LDL in the bloodstream, then eventually it will get oxidized. Even if you live like a very clean lifestyle, even if you avoid seed oils, even if you're metabolically healthy, there is something that will oxidize the LDL, like whether that be just some environmental factors or whatever it is. So ideally, I would still want the LDL to be, at least 120, something like that, 150 at most. But for that, you also need to have like low blood sugar and low inflammation and low triglycerides. So yeah, that's what I would feel comfortable. I wouldn't feel comfortable with a 260 LDL. There is, of course, genetic differences. Some people are hyper responders, or they have like this familial hypercholesterolemia, which, people with that gene variant probably have a high risk of heart disease as well because of that reason. So especially if you do have that genetic history of high cholesterol and heart disease, then I would be especially careful. How do we rebel and push back against the global social credit system? So that's another somewhat interesting topic. There will be some, for sure, like an app and stuff like that will track your social status with the government and stuff like that. I'm not inherently like against it. I wouldn't want it to happen, but it does obviously have like positives and its negatives. Like if you think it's all negative, then you're like, I think you're wrong, because there are some positives as well. Obviously the positives is that there's less crime, there's less trafficking, human trafficking, or less drug trafficking or whatever. There's somewhat more security in the sense, but the negative is obviously that the government can track you, the government can plug you off the grid and turn off your bank account and stuff like that. So it has like a huge negative, but it also has a few positives. So yeah, I personally think that we would want to obviously have a society where we don't need to have any social credit system. And I'm not saying that we should have it. I think we shouldn't have it. But like in this world that we do live in, there's positives and negatives. I think it's not worth it to create this dystopian social credit system, for sure. With that being said, how do we rebel against it or push against it? The easiest answer for that is to just not download the app or whatever they're creating. Don't use the software or don't use the system. Of course, you can't avoid it completely. You probably will have to use it at some point if it were to happen. Let's hope it not. But the only way is to become more self-reliant, self-sustained in terms of your food, your finance, and to not rely on the government for a lot of things. So like many people are just living to paycheck and they're on kind of dependent of the system for everything. But you want to have you want to be as off grid as possible in terms of self-reliance. So making sure you have your own food source, your own power source, and those kind of things, which again isn't possible for every people, but the goal is to kind of move towards that as much as possible, if that makes sense. Eat potato or sweet potato with or without skin. So I like the skin. It's nice if you cook it in the oven, it becomes a bit crunchy. So I don't think there's a reason to avoid the skin unless you have like very sensitivities to them. Usually the skin contains the lectins, but I don't think that lectins are a problem generally for most people, especially if you cook it. Only maybe like raw skins, maybe then it would be a problem. Hello, the best thing to reduce body inflammation, CRP. So CRP reduction generally has to involve like an entire lifestyle optimization. Besides diet, if you're eating a bunch of processed foods and seed oils and sugars and just overall calories, excess calories, then you just need to fix that. That's a big contributor to high inflammation. Another thing is just excess body fat. So if you have somewhat extra body fat, then the body fat or the body fat tissue will excrete pro-inflammatory cytokines into your bloodstream all the time, and it will like aromatase your testosterone away as well. So there's no health benefit to being overweight, and there's no benefit to your biomarkers to being even like somewhat chubby. So you want to have like a BMI of at least below 30, and body fat percentage for men 15% at most, and women 25%, something like that. Optimally men 10 to 12% is kind of the best, most healthiest range, I think, in my opinion. and females maybe 20-22%, but definitely not above 15% for men and 25% for females. Other ways to lower inflammation CRP is to exercise. So exercise in the short term does raise inflammation, but in the long term it actually makes you more, inflammation free in that sense. Cold showers, cold exposure, saunas do the same. From a few supplements like molecular hydrogen, vitamin C, NAC, just a few that come to mind immediately. But the most important thing is the body fat, exercise, and the diet, and sleep as well. If you're not sleeping enough, then your CRP will rise. Especially even like a few hours, like even like a single night of sleeping less than 6 hours raises your inflammation by a little bit, almost like 100%. How to get enough calcium? I drink raw milk. So if you are drinking or consuming any dairy, then you are probably getting enough calcium. The biggest sources of calcium are, dairy products, milk, cottage cheese, but also fish bones, sardines, salmon, and like animal bones as well, like tendons and ribs and those kind of things. Most likely, if you're not drinking or eating any dairy, then you probably aren't getting enough calcium unless you are literally eating like a lot of bones. So in that case, it's a bit problematic. So I think most people should consume some dairy, preferably like cottage cheese, if they're not allergic. Some plant-based sources are, spinach and like leafy greens, but they're very small in that regard. And if you are eating and drinking dairy, then you are getting generally enough. Is cold cryotherapy overrated? So, I mean, the cryotherapy chambers with the liquid nitrogen are definitely, I think, overrated or overpriced. Like one session, I think it costs like $50 and it lasts only like, 15 seconds. So it's not, I think, that kind of beneficial in terms of the cost to benefit ratio, because from a benefit side, then you'd get more benefits from an ice bath, which is generally free if you have an ice bath, or if you go to like a lake or something, a river, something like that. The cryo chamber is suitable if you're in a city and you don't have access to cold water, and it's kind of safer as well because you're not literally going into like a abandoned river or lake that can be dangerous. I think the cryotherapy is a bit overrated, but it has some benefits in terms of convenience, for sure. Which one is better? Cold baths are generally like more effective than cryotherapy. Optimal glycine to protein ratio for intake. Too much glycine bad. So too much glycine is hard to achieve. There's studies even like 90 grams and it has no negative side effects. And what I think the optimal glycine ratio would be, like a methionine increases your glycine demand. 1 gram of methionine increases your glycine demand by 1 gram of glycine. So I think generally you want to have like a balance, so that 50% of your protein comes from methionine-rich proteins that have higher methionine, like muscle meat, eggs, fish, dairy, and 50% of your protein comes from more glycine-dominant proteins like tendons, chicken drumsticks, fish skin. Fish actually has a quite balanced with a glycine-methionine ratio, like especially if you read it with the skin, so salmon with skin or sardines. Those are pretty balanced with that. But also plant-based proteins have higher amounts of glycine, beans, legumes. I'm not sure about soy, but I do think that soy has glycine. So soybeans' name is like Glycine Max, I think, in Latin. So that's kind of funny. But you also want to take like glycine supplements if you're eating like a lot of muscle meat. So I think like 10 grams of glycine on top of eating like chicken drumsticks and fish skin is a good way to go about it, or a good heuristic. Which websites do you read and use for research? Thank you. So most of my research is just done with PubMed and whatever the other science articles are. When I'm writing my books, then Dr. James sends me also like a bunch of papers to go through, and I also do my own research, but most of them just scientific studies on PubMed and whatever other journal it is. I don't read like any blogs or like influencer articles in terms of the studies or the research. I just go through the research directly. How do you reverse or slow male pattern baldness that comes with aging? So I think that depends a lot on your genetics. Yeah, if you have bad hair loss genes in your family, then you're probably also going to get it at some point. Men, will, it's not a matter of if, but when they will get some aspects of male pattern baldness. Some get it more than others. I haven't noticed anything of that. I don't have bad hair loss genes in my family. None of my grandfathers and my father aren't bald, so that's good. But things to slow down, obviously you need to make sure you consume enough protein and collagen that helps with the hair growth. Spermidine helps with hair growth, but those things are only, just bandaging this gushing wound. So you want to go to the source of putting out the wound itself. So that would include, I'm not into like inhibiting DHT with finasteride or something like that. I don't think that it's kind of worth it, but there are like some shampoos I think that could help or at least alleviate the process a little bit, like ketoconazole shampoo, minoxidil probably. So yeah, something like that. There's not a lot you can do. You can only kind of slow it down with those things, and making sure that your hormones are also optimized. And insulin resistance, I think, can have like a negative effect as well. Radiotherapy, microneedling, those are also options. But again, like they're not really inhibiting hair loss. They're just helping to grow the hair. Doing OMAD and not eat before 6 hours after the training, is it too much and for a woman? I think 6 hours after training is too much, like especially for a woman. You want to do it let's say 3 hours as a female. So yeah, that can answer the question. As a man, you can probably get away with more. You can get away with 8 or 10, but it's not still optimal for the hypertrophy and stuff. I would stick to 4 hours at max for either case. Thoughts on L-Carnitine supplement to use daily? So L-Carnitine is great. I think if you're eating animal protein and meat, then you are probably getting enough. But supplementing carnitine can help with androgen receptor density, which helps with muscle growth. But there is the conversion of carnitine into TMAO in the gut, which is associated with increased heart disease risk. Some people say that you can take like garlic or allicin to counteract that. Maybe that can be so. So yeah, I do take carnitine before my exercise, so I don't take it daily. I only take it before resistance training to help with the androgen receptor density and muscle growth from that. But that's how we do it. Nicotine are really bad. So nicotine alone isn't. So nicotine gums, patches, they're not really like harmful. They actually have many cognitive and neuroprotective effects. So they're good nootropic for focus and productivity, and as well, help to prevent some aspects of neurodegeneration. But if you get the nicotine from smoke or smoking, then obviously that's kind of bad. With nicotine, it's obviously like addictive substance. If you start using too much, then it will have, psychological and physiological negative side effects. One of the biggest things that you could get from getting too much nicotine is like decrease in vasodilation and decreased blood flow. So it can, be problematic for heart disease as well as other aspects of, blood flow. If you get it too much, or if you take it too much, I think like 2 milligrams a day is very safe, but more than that, 4 milligrams, 6 milligrams is probably a bit too much. Best way to improve deep sleep. So for that, deep sleep happens in the first half of the night, which occurs, in conjunction with the other repair hormones like melatonin, growth hormone, and autophagy. So what you want to do is that before bed, like an hour or so, you want to have already melatonin surging through your body. So for that, block out blue light, use red light in your bedroom, wind down, maybe take a melatonin supplement like 1 milligram, and that's going to boost your melatonin levels already naturally. And when you do fall asleep, you're going to have higher amounts of melatonin that helps with the repair and gets you more deep sleep. That's how you essentially do it. Do you need to protect eyes when using red light? So I wouldn't look into directly the red light. that will harm the eyes because it's too bright. but yeah, you can gaze around it and it won't have like any direct negative side effects. Last question, and this is a weird one. Have you tried raw deer placenta? No, I haven't. I'm not very keen on doing that. I don't think I'll ever do it. But yeah, I don't see any like real reason to do that. Maybe raw liver that could have like some benefits, but yeah, no, not interested in raw deer placenta. But that's it for this Q&A. If you want to ask yourself a question, then make sure you follow me on Instagram at Siim. But other than that, thanks for watching this video. Make sure to click like, subscribe, notification bell as well. My name is Siim. Stay optimized, stay empowered.